teeny, teeny, teeny. I think she'll be okay. So what's worth the calories? Cheesecake. Ah. Very good. Ah.
So I have a question for you.
I think I'll be there until we close. I will at some point. I won't have the I mean, I have a very tiny congregation, 60, 65.
That's what they get.
But the difference is we own our building. And so, everybody wants to merge with us because they want to take our building and sell it. That's why everybody wants to merge with us. Because they'll make a killing if they take our building and sell it. And so we're not doing that. At the moment, we're holding our own. We're not growing. We're not decreasing rapidly. We're just. I still have barely, but I still have a meeting on Saturday mornings with people who attend, people on Zoom, people on Facebook. I still have a meeting on Friday nights, 15, 20, unless we have a dinner. Like, we're going to have a Shavuot dinner. And I'm sure I'll have 35 for Shavuot. If we have a dinner, I have 35 to 40. And churches, except for evangelical churches are experiencing very similar decline. And it's because there's not an influx of younger folks. And the older folks die. And when they die, their numbers aren't being made up by younger folks. And it's because the younger folks now, they want something spiritual, but they don't want it to be organized, and they don't want people to tell them how to worship. They want to feel spiritual, they want to feel God, but they don't want someone to tell them, and here are the rules. You do this, you do this, you do this. They don't want that. I understand. here.
So slow.
I mean, they're,
Adrian called me from work, because I gave her
to me, it's like, look, just come in and
so she said,
experience God with us.
she loved it. And it's the recipe. Adrian gave me an old 80s cookbook.
Any more?
So the savory, yeah, because it's old. All the Gazasha is no map? Sweets, really. But I often, I didn't use as much oil. After that. But I never used any. I'll make it a bit.
Where is everybody? I have an announcement. Okay. Shh. All right. Rabbi mentioned that we would be having classes this summer for 4 weeks in the middle of July, like we did last year. And we're not charging you for this series of classes because we have a benefactor who has given us sufficient funds for this. So we're very appreciative of this individual. And we'll have more information available as soon as Rabbi has the time to write it up for us. Well, the benefactor, I can't say that right now, but anyway. The other thing I want to say, and Judy, where is Judy? She asked me about the car in the front, and nobody's really asked the question, why is that car blocking security? So Lana answered the question. Remember there was a synagogue where a car rammed into the front doors, and well, that's why they have the car there. So you don't have to ask anybody. Now you know. Now you can share the information to others. Well, it's such a, that's the car that's available. It belongs to the synagogue, and it's for the young people, and that's the only car that's available.
But I'm saying it takes up two handicap, it doesn't need to cover two handicap spots.
Well,
There's another space that it can go into without two.
all right, I'll mention it. I'll mention it to security. Anyway, all right, well, I'll mention it. Okay, well.
So, good morning, everyone. So, what I want to do today is I want to finish. We almost finished Belgium last week, but I didn't quite get there. So, we're going to finish Belgium, and then I figured we'll take a little trip to Canada. So, I was on C. So I was, ABC. I was on C, and my first thought was, let's do Cuba. And I thought, oh, okay, Zisel will be really involved in this one. So it may be, if we finish, it may be Cuba next week. And and then Zisel will be there to give us a bunch of firsthand information. Yes? Oh, good. Okay. So you'll be able to give us some great information too. Okay, wonderful. So let's finish Belgium first. Okay. So the place we ended last week was that during World War I, there were many Jews from Antwerp who fled to the Netherlands. And of course, they came back after 1918, after World War I had already ended and it was safe for them to come back. By 1939, Belgium had a large population of Jews, 80,000. And there were many refugees from Germany and Austria, because we know Hitler's rise begins when? 33, very good. The rise of the Democratic Socialist Party right around 1933. Say again? They had been making inroads in the 1920s, and by 33, Hitler was on a roll. There were obviously when Belgium comes under Nazi occupation, there are lots of anti-Jewish laws, there's deportations, and the Belgian Jewish community then is in serious trouble. From 42 to 44, close to 25,500 Jews were deported. So remember, they had 80,000. Then there were 25,000. And they were deported to Auschwitz. And of that 25,000, only 1,000 survived. And it's also true that many Belgians hid Jews. They really tried hard to protect the Jews. 1,665 Belgians are recognized as righteous people among the Gentiles. So Belgium was one of those countries where the population stepped up and really did try to save our people in a larger way than others. Yes?
Well, this is one I have a connection to because my high school boyfriend was one of those Belgians that survived. And I regret not asking him further. I do know that he got reparations enough to buy a 58 Chevy. And that's about it. I can't add any more to it.
This was high school boyfriend?
Yeah, he would have been born in 43.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful. So the Jewish community rebuilt after World War II, although, as in most of Europe, the Jewish community never recovered in the way that it had been before the war. And we know that. I mean, there was, I think it's 1/3 of the population of Jews on the planet were destroyed during World War II. And that left the two large communities of the United States and Israel after that. So, there's no place in Europe that was able to reconstitute its population to before the war levels. Today, Belgium has like 30 to 40,000 Jews. It's a fairly good amount. Mostly they're in Antwerp and Brussels, the two large cities. And of course, Antwerp remains the center of Orthodox life, and they have the diamond industry. And so they're diamond, and there are so many Orthodox Jews who are involved in the diamond trade. The country remains committed to Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism. And so the Jewish population of Belgium is doing well, comparatively speaking. So Belgium remains one place where, in Europe, clearly where Jews are prospering. But we know all throughout Europe, all throughout the world, everything changed after October 7. Now, about 25,500 were deported under Nazi occupation. There were deportations, anti-Jewish laws. So let's see, I don't have the exact number, but let's see, let's say it's 30,000. So there were 50,000 left who either fled, figured out a way to get out, were hidden or died within Belgian territory. And then today, all the numbers I have is that today Belgium has like approximately 30 to 40,000. So I would I don't have the information, but I expect, like most countries, many Jews left when Israel was created. Yeah. Yes, Zisel.
Before I forget, because I have got David, I never mentioned it, but during Hitler's rise, there was a Jewish man who joined the brown shirts,
During Hitler's rise, there was a Jewish man who joined the brown shirts,
and he rose to be a sergeant,
and he rose to be a sergeant.
a World War I veteran, and these whole Nazis, they told him, better get out of here.
And the Nazis told him, "You better get out of here."
Good for you. We're telling you this because you're our buddy.
Right.
Took the advice. He came to the States.
He came to the United States, and he lived his life here. How did you hear about this?
I read it.
You read it?
I know I read it on my computer or on the internet. Where, I'm not sure, but that's where I got information.
Great.
And he was one of the very few. There were others of them for other reasons before, but
Right.
he came to the States and he lived the rest of his life.
Very good, very good. Okay, so let's talk about Canada. Tell us about Judaism in Canada. I'm sorry, I've forgotten. What's your name again? Lydia.
So I see Eleanor is here, so she can also chime in, because she's
Okay.
from Canada.
Good, good. Let's get some firsthand experiences.
Anyway, well, I can speak for my family, my immediate family. The first wave from our family came to Canada, Toronto mostly, and some Montreal, after the First World War. And so there was a big wave of immigration from mostly Poland and Russia. And like I said, they settled mostly in Montreal and in Toronto. Now, Montreal was at that time very Roman Catholic. And so the people, the Jews.
Watch your foot on the wire.
Oh, okay. And so the Jews mostly came to Toronto, although a lot of them came to Montreal. And a very flourishing community grew in both places. And then there was a huge, and of course the Jewish people who came were very successful in business, and they were very educated. They went to University of Toronto, which is one of the best schools in Canada, and the children of these children also were very successful. Then there was a second wave of immigration after the Holocaust, and that's when my family came. And again, you know, they came with nothing, and some went to Montreal. Most of them came to Toronto, and there was a huge Jewish population, especially in Toronto. And I think there's like 500,000 Jews. 500,000.
So again, the children of the Holocaust survivors thrived in business and other professions like lawyers and doctors and what else is new? And so it's a very strong community. And growing up, it was very traditional. Most of the Jewish people in Toronto lived either east or west of this one street that went basically from almost downtown up to the city limits. And then they, as the city grew, they moved outside the city limits. And now there's many, many, many Jewish families. And like I said, a lot of them send their kids to day school. There are a lot of synagogues. They're very active. They're not dying like they are here. Lots of kosher places to buy food and to eat out. And it's a very strong and thriving community. And sadly, at this point in time, there's a lot of anti-Semitism because there's a big influx of Muslims from the Middle East, and they do not like the Jews, and so there's a big problem now. A lot of the people who came are afraid. I mean, just like anywhere, but it was such an open community that you know, no one was that nobody was afraid to say they were Jewish. I mean, and now everybody hides it. So it's gotten really, really bad. Well, there was a well, and also because
Thank you, Lydia.
My mother lived in Edmonton when she was a child. She came from Russia. She landed with her family in England and tried to get into the U.S. And they couldn't. So they moved to Canada and ended up in Edmonton. And it became a thriving Jewish community at that time. And they finally got visas to the United States, but much later. But they were in Edmonton for 5 or 10 years.
That in the late 1900s,
So I'm aware that in the late 1900s, when there was a independent Quebec movement, that a lot of the affluent business-type Jews from Montreal left to Toronto, and the community in Montreal is not anywhere as thriving as it used to be.
that's true. But that was in the late 1960s when the separatist movement came about in Quebec. And so a lot of the Jewish people in Montreal moved to Toronto.
late 1960s, early 70s.
Yes, yes. And so it's a different community now. It makes me sad because, you know, I mean, it's funny because my mother, who was a Holocaust survivor, when I was younger, I would wear a Mogen David on my neck, a necklace, and my mother used to say, "Oh, It's so wonderful you're not afraid to wear that. And now they are. Now the kids, a lot of the parents have changed their last names. Because I have a girlfriend, I'm still in Toronto, and she says a lot of the Jewish families have changed their last names so they don't sound Jewish. And it's just very sad to see how things got. Well, what happened was during the government of Justin Trudeau, who's just recently left, yeah, he had an open policy to let everybody into Canada. I mean, no matter what their background was, he didn't discriminate, but they also didn't check, the people's backgrounds. So there was this huge wave of Muslim immigration, and now Toronto, and I'm sure other places, have a very large Muslim population, and they are very, very anti-Semitic and very, very vocal against Israel.
There was also a large immigration from the Caribbean at the same time.
Oh, from the Caribbean? Okay.
Yeah, in the late to 60s and 70s. Yeah, that came to Toronto. Yeah.
Do you want to add some stuff?
Not much.
First-hand accounts are better than anything that I can talk about. So
Lydia covered a lot. My family, my grandparents came over to North America before World War I. So I can't go anywhere beyond that. I was going to say, growing up in Toronto, it was known as Church City. Sundays, everything was closed. I didn't feel any anti-Semitism, but I know it existed. I didn't find out till much later in life, where in school, we went to public school, and I'm going to say maybe a quarter to a third of our class was Jewish in the area that my parents moved in, a lot of young families, Jewish families. But they asked us to stand. Who's going to be away for the holidays? I didn't realize at the time, I thought it was special. I was standing because I was special. I had this special holiday, and realized that that was truly under the whatever was anti-Semitic. Pierre Trudeau, who was worshipped, Justin's father, I found out later in life that he let in a lot of Nazis into Canada. There was another thing I was going to say about the Jewish population. Oh, there was a time also where a lot of Pakistanis came in, but the Jews didn't have problems at all with Pakistani immigrants. It's now that they're shooting, if you've heard, there's one temple at 3 in the morning, they're shooting bullets into it. And recently there is a Jewish storefront that was broken into 3 times. My cousins still live there. They give me a little bit of information, the ones who want to talk about it, only one. And yes, Justin Trudeau was a huge problem, very much like the United States has a huge problem. So I feel badly. I had a wonderful, wonderful childhood. My grandparents, just as an aside, were from Lithuania, Belarus, and Ukraine. So they were around Poland, not in Poland. But I can't trace, not yet. My father changed his name. He was the only one of his generation who went to college. He became a pharmacist. He was 4F in the Army, a terrible feat of all things. And I'm a podiatrist. And he had to change his name because of the anti-Semitism during the war. So from Walensky, he went to Wallen. That's
Thank you, Eleanor.
Thank you, thank you. So, yes,
My husband and I,
you have to,
can you hear me? My husband and I loved Vancouver. We were there several times. And the first time I was there, we were on a vehicle, and I noticed far away, like 3 triangles, or 2 triangles, and I had a feeling it was a synagogue, but it was too late. We were getting ready to leave. I couldn't do anything. The next time we came to Canada, this is 25 years ago, one of the first things I did was open a phone book and try to find where a synagogue was. And we couldn't find any listing. Churches we found, we couldn't find any listing for synagogues. So I had a good memory then. So we walked in the general area and not in a vehicle, and we were looking, and we stopped a few people, but they were all tourists. And there was one guy I remember walking with a briefcase. So I stopped him and I asked him if he knew where a synagogue was, and indeed he told us where it was. We were not far from it. I said, I can't understand why it's not listed in the phone book. And this is a guy in a suit, tie, and he said, well, not everybody likes Jews here. I couldn't reply, and anyway, but that was 25 years ago, so that kind of almost ruined our experience. But we went to the synagogue, and we found a very young, modern rabbi in a t-shirt and a tattoo and an earring, and I don't remember the name of it. We left a donation, and then we got like a couple cents back on a check for exchange of the money. I don't know, but we just loved Canada, and the people were so nice. If you stood on a corner, and they would come up to you and ask if you need help in going somewhere. So it really saddens me so much to hear that. Yeah, and I remember when you're on the train, there are posters all around welcoming people from all over.
Just real quick. My best friend for 72 years came from England to Canada and came into Winnipeg because they couldn't get into the United States. So I guess after the war, they were allowed to come in, and I met her in 1953, so it's about 8 years after the war. Okay, that's it.
very good, very good. So, Jewish presence in Canada goes all the way back to the 18th century, so the 1700s. And the first known Jewish person in Canada, her name was Esther Brandow. And she arrived in what was then called New France. So if you want to know why, as Lydia pointed out, Montreal was so Roman Catholic, it's because it was French. And obviously Roman Catholicism is the predominant religion for the French. Remember, if you go back, we talked even last week about this, the 30 Years' War between the Roman Catholic House of Bourbon in France and the Protestant House of Habsburg in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So France was a bastion of Roman Catholicism, shall we say. And she arrived in 1738. And get this, she was disguised as a Christian boy. And she was deported when they found out that she was a Jew. And it was because of Catholic restrictions against Jews coming in to New France. At the moment, Canada has, as of the 2021 census, Canada has the 4th largest Jewish population in the world, behind Israel, the US, and France. And it makes up 0.9 almost 10% of the population of Canada. That's actually a lot. That's a lot. We're only what? We're only 2% in the U.S. Yeah.
10% of the population today?
Almost 10%, point 0.9. Oh, what am I reading? 0.9%. Still a lot. It's still pretty good. Okay.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I'm doing my job here. The Birkenheims wrote, it just disappeared. Ken and Eileen, I'm sorry. Technology's one. I'll be back.
Yeah, as you were saying it, I'm thinking, can that really be right? Yeah, I read it wrong. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so, yes. Trivia point from Cecil. Charles de Gaulle. Charles de Gaulle got himself in trouble because he visited Montreal and in French told them to rise up in revolution. Yeah. Sure.
He actually said, Vive Quebec Libre, which will be a free Quebec. As many of you maybe, I don't know, many of you know, many of you may know, Quebec has very, very strong French ties, very strong French ties. And there has been a separatist movement there for a very long time. And they go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth about wanting to become independent. And Gary says it's dissipated now. And they've lost that election every time, yes.
Okay.
Every time it's come up. Okay, here comes Susan.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Ken and Eileen wrote, we have friends in Toronto who live in a very Jewish neighborhood. I was surprised to see a glut kosher Chinese restaurant there.
I was surprised to see a glut kosher restaurant there, a Chinese restaurant there. Chinese restaurant, glut kosher. Okay, yes, Cecil. I lived in Maryland for a zillion. How long is a zillion? For a zillion years. Okay. You don't look old enough to be anywhere for a zillion. Okay. There was one kosher restaurant that was successful. He lasted longer than the others. Yeah, well, we got on the subject of Chinese kosher. Okay. This Chinese kosher restaurant lost their...
The problem was that they were keeping all the laws of kashrut, but they had a statue of Buddha, and they offered Buddha some rice. And the rabbi said that was the end of it. Okay, let's continue. Let me keep going here. So once the British conquer Quebec in 1759, Jews were able to settle freely. You just have to be careful, Evie. There we go. And that made it possible for a man whose name was Aaron Hart to arrive in 1760, and he is touted as the father of Canadian Jewry, Aaron Hart. And he established a community in French, it's called Trois-Rivières, Three Rivers. And in 1768, there was a synagogue in Montreal, Shearith Israel, the first synagogue in Canada. That's 1768. And it was the only synagogue in Montreal until 1846. So throughout the 19th century, Jewish immigrants arrived from Germany, Britain, and Eastern Europe, which is what you were talking about, a large immigration, the first wave, forming communities in Montreal, Toronto, and Halifax. And by 1871, the Jewish population in Canada had reached about 1,300. 1871, 1,300. But the Jews faced social and institutional discrimination. They were excluded from the elite professions, from social clubs. This is not unusual for us, right? We understand this. In 1807, approximately, Ezekiel Hart, who was Aaron Hart's son, he was repeatedly barred from taking part he was elected to a seat in the Quebec legislature, but he was barred from taking that seat because if you took a seat in the government, you had to recite an oath, which said that I take this oath as my true faith, on my true faith as a Christian. And so obviously he's not going to do that, and he couldn't do that. So he was kept out of the legislature from taking his place. Now that oath was amended in 1829, and it allowed Jews the right to refuse to say that part of the oath. Jews then get their full rights in 1831. By 1830, we have a Jewish city called Jewsburg, and it is now Kitchener, Ontario. So Kitchener, Ontario started as Jewsburg, and Jews moved obviously to that city because it was a place for Jews. In Ontario. It's what? North of Detroit? Okay, thank you. In 1871, Henry Nathan Jr. becomes Canada's first Jewish Minister of Parliament. So Jews are making inroads. Previous to that, in 1853, we had the first cemetery in Quebec, first Jewish cemetery, and in 1892, you had Beth Israel Synagogue built. And in the 1871 census, there were 1,115 Jews in Canada, 409 of them were in Montreal, 157 of them were in Toronto, and 131 were in another city called Hamilton. So 1,115 Jews in 1871. All right. Between 1900 and 1930, and we all understand this is Eastern European immigration in the early 1900s as a result of what? Pogroms started by the assassination of Tsar Alexander II in 1881. That's the precipitative event. That's the event that precipitates everything. Okay? And following that event, anti-Semitism is really brought out. And you have many pogroms and anti-Semitic events all throughout Eastern Europe and Russia. Okay. So between 1900 and 1930, large numbers of Eastern European Jews, as Lydia spoke about, fled the pogroms and persecution, and they settled primarily in Montreal, Toronto, and Winnipeg. The Jewish population grew to 16,000 in 1901 to over 150,000 by 1931. And so the Jews who came over faced similar situations as the Jews who came to the Lower East Side. The Jews who were already in Canada were established, wealthy, educated. The Jews who came over were not established, poor, and not educated. So it was a problem. The wealthier, educated Jews tried to figure out a way to absorb them into the community and help them, but they were also very much embarrassed by them, and it made them, the wealthier Jews, look bad, same way it did in New York. And so, as same way they did in New York, they established what were called, and you should know this word, Landsmannschaften. Landsmannschaften. Landsmannschaften were community organizations that were set up to help new arrivals get acclimated to the city. If they needed to figure out where to go for health care, if they needed to figure out where to go, how to find work, whatever. These organizations would help these new arrivals to feel a little more comfortable. However, yes? When I say new arrivals, no, this is for the people online, and you're not nearly loud enough for them. So, when you say new arrivals, what years am I talking about? I'm talking about the early 1900s, basically 1900 to 1930. And anti-Semitism intensified. There were universities like McGill, which is a well-known Canadian university for sure. McGill had Jewish quotas, and many public spaces, had signs that said "No Jews allowed." We've all been a part of this. I moved to Burbank in, 2000, something like that, and I was told in the 1950s that certainly, Burbank has a lower section, and then you go up on the hill, and the hill is the older established Burbank from way, way, way back. It's a beautiful area, but I was told in the 1950s there were signs all over the place up there, no Jews, no blacks. Really? Yep. Glendale was infamous for that too. Yeah. Yep. In 1914, there were many who came over. There were like almost 100,000 Jews who came over from Austria or Russia. They were all Ashkenazic Jews. And little by little, there became kind of a rift in the middle between those who were supporting Zionist causes and those who were more entrenched in establishing a Yiddish culture. And this happened in other places as well, in other countries. We've talked about this before. The sort of new guard who were veering towards Zionism and Zionistic ideas, establishing a homeland, and the old guard who wanted to preserve old European culture with the Yiddish. By the way, the Yiddish they won. In this case, they won. They didn't win in other places, but they did win here. Let's see. Canada's immigration policies during the 1930s were pretty restrictive towards Jewish refugees fleeing Nazism. And apparently there was a phrase going around the government at that time.
One is too many.
Good. I have it here as none is too many, but one is too many. That was the idea. None is too many. So Canada did not want to take in Jews. And in fact, in 1939, Canada turned away the St. Louis. If you recall, the St. Louis had 908 refugees from Europe, and they were trying to find a place to dock, and no one would take them. Canada turned them down. Eventually, they had to go back to Europe, and many of them were taken into concentration camps and killed. The St. Louis tried to dock in Havana, and the Jewish community contributed a lot of money to bribe. However, the money was lost because the American ambassador put his foot on the Cuban government, and Cuba rejected. Awful. Awful. Just terrible. Okay. I'm going to stop with that because I'm at time now, and I always cheat you out of a little break. So we're stopping with the St. Louis, and I'm going to pick up with the St. Louis next week, and we're going to go to Cuba next week after I finish Canada. So Zisel will have lots of good information for us. All right, everyone, have a beautiful week, and I'll see you next week. Say again?
Have a great week.
Thank you, my friend. Igualmente.
talking about Canada, so I needed a jacket.
It's not unusual, about the third or fourth time. You forget, you know, it's like it's cold and then it gets too warm in here when you leave.
I leave my water cups all over.
Well, if you leave yours, at least you're nearby, so.
sharing that with you, yeah. Okay, we're going to begin. So we are, I can't remember where we left off, so, because I was away and then back, right, Bereshit. So here's what we're going to do. Let me give you a plan for the next several weeks. So we have like 5 or 6 more sessions, something. Okay. This is the Torah. You should read it. We're breaking for the summer. 2 more? Yeah. Yeah, we didn't even get through. Okay. All right, so how about this? Yeah, exactly. we didn't even get through like the first Aliyah. we nothing like a little good anti-Semitism and a war with Iran to get us derailed from studying Torah. Okay, so there's 2 more. Hold on. Let's just wait a second. So we're gonna review the calendar here just for 1 second. So we have class the 13th and the 20th, and then the 27th. What are you guys all going to like the water park or something? The beach day. School's out for the summer. Okay. I see. Okay, that's great. Okay, so 2 more weeks. So here's what we'll do. We'll study a little Torah together on these 2 weeks, and I'll keep in mind for next year, if I remember, I think doing something that's more episodic, like that is self-contained each session, works better. Because to do something that has a through line, first of all, there's so much difference in who's here given week to week. And then also, I know my schedule is kind of erratic. And so therefore, I think it works better in prior years when we have, we did like a piece of Talmud, but we did 1 story per session. So if you missed, it didn't matter. Okay, so I'll file that in the file cabinet upstairs. Which means I'm going to forget, which means you should all yell at me next year when I start. I'm like, okay. So why don't we do this? Why don't we begin today? Why don't we study the story of Noah today? And then 2 more after this. I saw your son yesterday. It was a terrible place I saw him, but I saw him. Yeah. I was in Palos Verdes for a funeral. Yeah. It was awful funeral, but anyway, I just thought of you. We were talking nicely about you people. I was trying to give them the sisterhood there the recommendation to teach mahjong and charge all the young folks to raise money for the school. So, okay. So we are going to do the story of Noah today, and maybe that'll bleed into next time, and then 2 more after today. And then maybe we'll get into the story of Abraham. So let's see where we go. We'll skip around a little bit. Okay. So why don't we do this? Why don't we read? I'm tempted to do this. Let's read the story in chavruta, which means do it in a pair. And let me ask. So read from page. Yeah, from page 41 to page 40. 49. 41 through 49. You're right. You know what? Let's not do it this way. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm trying to let's just read it out loud together. Okay. So we'll read it together and and we'll stop periodically for thoughts. Okay. This is the line of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless in his age. Noah walked with God. So so a few of you sort of voiced out verse 9. Ela toldot Noach. Noach ish tzadik tamim haya bedorotav. Eta Elohim hitalech Noah. So it says here that Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless in his generation. So let's have a conversation about that. So what do you think that means? Why? Well, first of all, what's the question? What entices, and this is the way that you look at the medieval meforshim, the medieval commentators, as well as really any other commentator. It's the classical, with Rashi, when you study Rashi, I know Rabbi Bernhard likes studying Rashi, that it was Mahakashia Rashi. That's what you ask in yeshiva. What's bothering Rashi? So if this verse demands commentary, if it demands explication or imagination, what in this verse compels us to offer explication, interpretation, or imagination? Good. You could say, right, if there is, the law hasn't been given, so how can you say that he was righteous? Now, you could make, that's a good point. Remember, I want to make that point before. You could make the point, well, God's taught, the text is talking to the reader, so the reader has a general feel of what righteousness is. So, but that is a good point. We didn't define our terms so well. Righteous, it says here tzaddik, that's a strong, in Hebrew, it feels stronger than it does in English, right? Okay, what are some of the other questions that you may have? Go ahead. Good. Why does the text have to qualify it? Why does it say ish tzadik tamim, that he was a purely righteous person, haya, bidorotav, in his generation? So why that, bidorotav, blameless in his age? Hold on for 1 second, Zizla, I see you there. Why does the text need to say that? That is a question that pretty much every commentator has offered some, and we'll get to it in just a second. Right now we're just identifying the questions. We'll get to the comments in a second. What question do you have about the text?
In the beginning, you got Bereshit talking about the formation of the world and the and people, etc. And then suddenly we jump to Noah. Mm-hmm. How many generations are between Bereshit and Noah?
10.
And because now we have the corrupt world, and how did we become so corrupt?
Yeah.
With the distinction between the
Good.
two parashot.
Good. So Ernie wants to know, so why does the text, what happens with the text that what happens that all of a sudden things are going bad? And I just started where I started, and I should have started a little earlier. But this class hasn't been well structured by me. So if you look back on page 34 for a second, the Lord saw how great was man's wickedness on earth, and how every plan devised by his mind was nothing but evil all the time. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on earth, and his heart was saddened.
The Lord said, I will blot out from the earth the men whom I created, men together with beasts, creeping things, and birds of the sky, for I regret that I made them. But Noah found favor with God. V'Noach matzah chen b'nei Adonai. So it's these, I think it's 10 generations from Adam to Noah. And in this, the text explains like things are not going well. There's corruption, and maybe this helps us understand what the counterpoint of righteousness. So that's what's going on. Okay. Zissel, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to point out in his time being a key to the paragraph, because you cannot compare what righteousness is today to what righteousness was back then. In his time, he was righteous. It doesn't mean that he was righteous in 2021 with our mores.
Right.
There were different mores, and within his mores, he was righteous.
It's good. He's getting worked up. It's good. It's like yeshiva. Go ahead, Lydia.
Well, I think it's important that that when it says he was blameless in his age, I think it's a foreshadowing of what's to come for him, that he would be the one that God asks to save
Save the world.
The world.
Right. Okay. Yeah, you want to say something?
I want to
Elizabeth?
support what Lydia said, that it's set up right away. He's going to be asked to do something right from the beginning. So,
Right.
and then the next section you read is that the world is corrupt, and he isn't corrupt, so you know what's going to happen.
All right, but back to Bridget's question and Zissel's sort of underlining of it. If this is a movie or like a classic, like cowboy western, you know how like the cowboys used to wear the white hats and the villains always used to wear the black hats, so you'd turn it on and you knew wherever you were you could turn it on like 3/4 of the movie, like he's the bad guy, he's the good guy, right? And the bad guy was always unshaven and looked like he hadn't slept in a week, and the good guy was like very yeah, exactly. So why does it say though, like why the qualification of his righteousness? It's almost like saying, yeah, he'd wear a white hat in this movie, but in another movie maybe not, or maybe his hat would be whiter in another movie. In other words, like why does it need to weigh in? Why couldn't the text just say, like, it could foreshadow it, Lydia and Rosalie. It could say this is what's going to happen, where Noah's going to play an important role. But Bridget's question and Zissel's point still stands, which is, great, you're right, like, the text is Noah's important. Take note of Noah. But then why do we have to qualify his tzadikness? Good. Yes. Good. Good. So let's look at it this way. So let's play this out. In his could look at this as, in his generation, both in a positive and a negative way. So the positive way of looking at it is, wow, he stayed righteous despite the bad atmosphere. You know, my kid is starting college applications, and they had this whole college workshop at his school. They do a really good job with the college preparations and all this. And they had this really interesting fair where they brought in members of, like, people who worked professionally in universities who are on the admissions committee. And we did a model admissions night. So what we did was we were tasked they broke us into small groups, and we had all these profiles, and the person, it was a fictitious university, said like, okay, these are, this is what our school looks like, this is what we do, and which of these kids are we going to admit? And then we had the papers of all the different students, and it was actually very interesting. But what was very clear was that context mattered for the application. So let's be real. My kid goes to Milken Community. My kid and my paycheck both go to Milken Community School, right? Which is a wonderful, wonderful school. And let's be real, like, they have every advantage in the world. Extra tutoring. They have these nights where with the college application, like any place around, they give both like academic, emotional, they have the best of labs, they have everything is state of the art, nothing is, like even on back to school night, they put out some food for the parents, it's not like pizza, it's like salmon kebabs with like chutney sauce, right? Like, what's that? Well, I actually joke with that. I say, you can hold the salmon kebab. Can you give me a $20 refund on the tuition? I'll take it. I can eat a can of tuna at home. But what the admissions counselor said, no, it matters. Like, we want to know about the high school. So for a child who made in a large public school, made bad choices in terms of course selection, we're not going to hold it against that student. But a student at Milken who makes bad choices, doesn't choose, right, or like doesn't do it, like we see that, like they should have done better because they're not necessarily academically better, but maybe that as well. But it's easier to fall through the cracks of the larger private schools. And even like the sloppiness or the way, like with the college applications, it's such a contrast to when I was applying. We don't send the application directly to the college. You funnel it through their school, and the school sees everything that you do and has it in their office processed and coded and everything 2 months in advance. When I applied to college from the public school, I met with a guidance counselor for 15 minutes, and that was my pre-counsel, my college counseling. And it doesn't even compare. So context, I guess this is all a way of saying that context matters. That's what the admissions officer was saying. Like, a child who goes to Milken, we're expecting different than we are expecting from a child who goes to Van Nuys or Grant. We're just expecting different. So we could look at that positively with Noah and say, like, look at this, like, to Ernie's point, look at this decrepit age that Noah lived in. And yet he still managed to somehow sparkle. He still managed, like, no one around him was doing the right thing. The world had degraded itself to such an extent that God's self, was ready to destroy, and in fact will destroy, and start over again. There's nothing good going on in the world. God is ready to, wants a do-over. But somehow Noah still retained not only decency, but a tzadikness. Wow. Noah didn't go to Milken. Noah went to like the School of Hard Knocks. And yet he's still sparkling. So maybe that's all the better for Noah. That's the positive way of looking at this. Now, go the other way. What's the negative way of looking at this? Sure, but everyone's always influenced by other people. Like, we just use different mediums and different tools, but, when I was, like, we are all influenced by, now, when I was a kid, we thought you'd be influenced by TV. Your parents are like, don't let the kid watch too much TV, it'll rot their brain. Now you're like, oh, as long, like, TV is better, no one even watches TV anymore. TV would be better than YouTube, which is like truly stupidity. Like stupidity, ever spend any time on YouTube with your grandchildren? I mean, it is just, at least the TV usually a story has a front, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And YouTube, it's like, it's just babbling. It's sort of, what I do during this class. But let's take away the mediums. Let's just bring it back to how can we look at, like, assuming that times are different, yes, and influence is different. How I just gave a very favorable impression of Noah based on the qualifying comment of Bedorah Tav in his generation. I said, wow, like Noah got like, Noah knew to took like an AP class or two, and he got all A's and some B's, maybe like a C, but like he never met with his college, he didn't even have a college counselor. And Noah did okay. Like he like looked like what he did in in chemistry. Wow. Right. So look, he did it in shipbuilding. So Noah's okay. Now make the other argument. Okay, who hasn't gone yet? Go ahead, Bridget. Make the other argument against Noah. Right, because of his age, he doesn't have to do a lot to rise above him. It's sort of like when you, like I remember going out to play basketball with my kids when they were little. Right? When they were little, I felt like Kobe Bryant on the basketball court. My kids are this big, bam, shooting and, everything. Oh, Dad, you're so good. You're an all-star. Why didn't you become a professional basketball player? Now the years have passed and now it's like this. I don't want to go outside and play with them. Right? They don't, right? Like, I'll get hurt. So I look good relative to them, but I'm not a basketball player. I've never been any good at basketball. So there's two different ways of looking at Noah. One, you can look at him with he went to the School of Hard Knocks and not Milken. Positive. Wow, he still managed to shine even though all the strikes were against him. The other way of looking at it is, right. This is the argument, wow, if Noah had real resources, imagine what Noah could have been. This argument is, he was a tzaddik Bedorah Tav, but like maybe in a nicer generation, he would have been like, at best. Mediocre guy. All right, Sissel, what do you think?
It is go contrary to the flow. Whether the flow is very rapid or not, it's his flow. He has to swim.
Okay, so then you're saying you're making the argument that the context actually does matter, and that it's not like his achievements, but it's his ability to stand up against it. So that he was able to say no when everyone else was saying yes, that speaks well of him. And so it's a positive reading of Noah. Like, think about everyone who was doing bad stuff and he still managed to stay away from that. So better for Noah. Okay. Zissel, you'll be disappointed to know that most of the rabbis disagree with you. Okay. Now, they're forced in a way to their answer. Most rabbis actually most of rabbinic literature lands over here. The me playing basketball with my kids example. That Noah was, he was Tzaddik B'Dorotav, righteous in his generation, but in any other generation he would have been, like a middle-aged, 5'9", uncoordinated, person. That's me. So they would say no. They would disagree with that. But so most of rabbinic literature paints Noah as good for his time, but not good enough. B'Dorotav, tzaddik B'Dorotav, diminishes his tzaddikness. The qualifier diminishes it. It doesn't enhance his status. Now, why do you think the rabbis, and I said this, so they disagree with Zissel, but I said they were compelled to do this. The rabbis, rabbinic literature, which is written, hundreds of years after the Bible is codified, are compelled to see Noah in less than terms because they're dealing with a reality that demands that Noah needs to be slightly less. What do I mean by that, Lana?
They would have made this distinction if he had been a fairly righteous person. He had to be not so good, otherwise, why would they say in his generation? And I'm going to think,
You could say that it was an enhancer. He's really
no, he.
You could read it at the qualification could either be read as an enhancement or a detractor.
No, if he was a fairly righteous person, they wouldn't bother to say.
Say fairly, they say righteous in his generation.
Right, it's a disqualifier that he's really not that righteous.
So Lana sees it as a disqualifier.
Right. Now, the other thing that I was thinking about is the emphasis on his generation. They could have expressed it many other ways, but that implies that generations change from one generation to another. And we are influenced by what everybody else is thinking. And as times have changed in the last 50 years, things that we thought were correct 50 years ago are not necessarily correct today, or vice versa. I mean,
Yeah, right, good. So you could look at it differently with his generation, because like he, in his generation, nothing wrong with going to McDonald's and having a Big Mac, because you can't keep kosher. Yeah. So here a little bit more. Yes. So it's not only him getting drunk, which they probably, and not only him having children with his. He gets so drunk that he has children with his daughters, but also because the story doesn't. Why do we need 10 generations more to Abraham? If Noah was so good, he would have been the first Jew. but he's not. So for the rabbis think like the ultimate prize is selection to be the first Jew. That's Abraham. So they look and say, B'dorotov, Tzaddik B'dorotov is a cue to us that it's a diminishing characterization, not an enhancement. Because if he was so great, he would have been distinguished as the first Jew. And since he wasn't distinguished as the first Jew, we have to explain why. And then from that, they also say, Et ha'Elohim hitalech Noach, that Noah walked with God. And then there's a line later on that Abraham walks in front of God, before God. So Noah is no trailblazer. Like Noah's like, contextually good, but maybe not. That's how the rabbis say it. So they go to the negative. Now let's also look at Noah, knowing a little bit about Noah in the story. How does the story confirm either a negative or positive view of Noah's actions? I'll give you a spoiler here. Noah builds a big boat and puts a lot of animals on and they survive the flood. That's the spoiler alert. How does his actions during that either add to the positive or negative qualification of Noah? And that's where the rabbis, hold on for one second, this is an important point. This is where the rabbis make the big distinction. Now, you're right. That they say, wait a second, Noah just builds the boat. He does exactly what God wants. But he doesn't try and put anyone else on the boat. He doesn't say to God, hey, can I build a third, like an upper decker or something like that, and put more people on? He does what he is told. He saves who he is told to save. Let's contrast that with Abraham in Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham advocates for others. Abraham stands up to God and says, wait a second, destruction of this city, how can we get the innocent people out? Right? Would you destroy the city? And then bargains with God. And on this pace, we'll read this story probably, the next maybe 15 years from now at our pace that we're going at. But, it's in the future. Another spoiler alert. But Abraham is different than Noah. The rabbis spend a lot of time comparing Noah to Abraham and looking at B'dorotov, and they say, wait a second, the negative qualification of Noah, it fits because he's not spectacular with the boat. He builds it. He listens to God. It's better than Jonah. Right? Jonah's like real, But he's no Abraham. He doesn't merit being the first, because he doesn't exhibit, and then the rabbis go one step further and they say, this is a lesson to us as the Jewish people. The distinguishing factor of the Jewish people is the ability to stand up and speak differently. That's what makes Jews Jews, to go against the tide. So Noah didn't go along with everybody, but he didn't object at all. At least the text doesn't allude to it. He doesn't object at all to the discussion. There's only one midrash that kind of like, that I know of, that comes out a little bit in favor of Noah. And it imagines Noah building the boat, and that people come by and say to Noah, like he intentionally built the boat slowly, in a very public place, so people would pass by. And as they passed by, they'd say, "Hey, what are you doing there?" And he said, "Let me tell you, I'm building this boat because things are about," he sounds like one of those wackos who stands outside of the supermarket. But that's what he did. Like he says, "Hey, let me tell you about what's going to happen." And so that midrash actually paints a favorable picture of Noah. But most of rabbinic literature draws a distinction between Abraham and Noah and says that Noah, it's qualified as righteousness. The qualification is a negative one. That it shows that in another generation he wouldn't have sparkled. He didn't become corrupt like everyone else, but he didn't have moral courage. He was fine, but he didn't really have moral courage. He was okay. He kept himself pure and his family pure, but he didn't help other people become better. Comments? Zissel, go ahead.
This simply proves to me that Abraham was far more intelligent than Noah, because Abraham had conceptual thinking. He saw immediately to save others, Sodom and Gomorrah, beyond the simple fact presented to him. Whereas Noah didn't do the conceptual thinking. He was told what to do and why and who to take, and never thought beyond that.
That's right.
No, we are talking about different intellectual incapacities.
Okay, one at a time. Go ahead. This is good. It's getting heated.
I disagree that, I'm not going to say that he's not as intelligent as Abraham was. I'm thinking that it might just be that he was more open. How many people do not speak up and just go along because they don't want to draw attention to themselves or think something's wrong? So who's to say that he didn't choose not to challenge God and instead just do what he wanted him to do? Am I completely lost here?
No, I think it's not. The reason that there's a disagreement here is because there's what to disagree about. The question is, like, are we asking, so Zissel says, wait a second, Abraham, and now Zissel's in line with classical Jewish thought, which is they're different. The rabbis don't use the word intelligences, but they're different moral fibers, right? And that Abraham far surpasses Noah. But then Ernie comes along and says, wait a second, it's a different time. Like, how can you compare the two? And then the added layer is, wait a second, but don't we all to some extent go along with it? And maybe that's the whole point. Like, when do we, now there's every few years, I think I was telling you this last time, there's I just finished this book called The Holocaust, An Unfinished History, and by this author, Dan Stone. And what Stone tries to say in his book is, wait a second, like how, especially with the nationalist Polish government up until like Tusk took over 2 years ago, but in Poland, like 5 years ago, you couldn't say the Poles were complicit with Germany. Like, that would get you arrested, actually. You had to say, like, it was the Nazis who did this. Stone's book, in some ways, is a response to that and says that Nourishkeit. He says, you're letting the Poles off too easily. He's saying, like, what? Like, 6 million people don't disappear because Hitler writes a book called Mein Kampf. Like, that doesn't just happen. Individuals made decisions on individual levels. Some were bigger, some were Eichmann-esque, and some were not, but but people made decisions, and those decisions have moral consequences. And so that would be the, in some ways that kind of like animates this decision as well. Like, is it okay just to say Noah did enough? But then was enough enough? It's not easy. Good. Yeah, no, Bridget, you're right. Like, maybe it has nothing to do, so you can argue, wait, you could look at Tzaddik B'dorotav, righteous in his generation, as a positive, and say, because it got so bad, they weren't ready. It wasn't that Noah wasn't, you could make this argument, the rabbis don't, but you could, it's not that Noah was, Noah wasn't ready to be, the world wasn't ready for the Jewish people. So, of course, Noah couldn't be the first Jew. It has nothing to do with his moral qualifications or not. The reason that Abraham was the first Jew is he was the right guy at the right time. Like, so much of history is often being the right person, at the right, the right circumstances. So it's not clear. Like, is Noah disqualified because he wasn't good enough, or the world wasn't ready? I mean, I don't want to say no one did. How about this? You make that argument well. So that's good. That's good. Anyone else want to say anything?
A couple of questions. How does the Bible describe Abraham in comparison? Is it qualified, or is it just outright he was righteous? Which goes back to the way Noah was described, it was qualified. And as far as Abraham's generation, they were idol worshipers, and he's going against the grain. He's not going to be treated, royally because he's an iconoclast.
So Abraham is described, they don't do the same, like introduction, and they don't make the same statements about Abraham. And it doesn't actually say in his selection, it doesn't actually say why he was selected, which is interesting. It just starts the text. That is the classical midrash that everyone learns in Sunday school. It's not in the Torah, right? And that midrash is a response to the absence of his resume beforehand. Like, you want to know. It's almost like we feel like we're. They do this now in all the comic book movies. They do origin stories, right? So, you have like a few Superman movies. They make a lot of money, and they're like, "Oh, we need to make more money. Let's make an origin story movie." And they rewind the clock, and so it's almost like we're looking here for an origin story for Abraham. The Torah doesn't give us one. Like, what, Vayomer Adonai el Avraham lech lecha. Wow, that's a big deal. Like, he's being summoned. Why? The Torah is not clear about that. Rabbinic literature tries to build a resume for him, but the Torah, unlike Noah, where it says he's a tzaddik b'dorotav, it's at least something. It's not a full resume, but it's hardly a ringing endorsement, or maybe it is, I don't know. It's either positive or negative, but we don't get anything with Abraham. Then the next thing we know, I will make you a great nation, I will bless you, make your name great, you shall be a blessing, I'll bless those who bless you and curse those that curse you, and all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. Abraham went forth as God has commanded, and Lot went with them. And now we're off and running. Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran. So Lech Lecha, he's 75 years young. Nothing mentioned about what happened beforehand. It's interesting. 1, 2, go ahead. He was still a pisher at 75. He was a bar mitzvah. He wasn't even eligible for a second bar mitzvah. It was okay. Yeah, so you could say by biblical age, 75 is pretty young. But but when Sarah's in her 90s and complaining about infertility, they don't. It's still, I think you would have to agree, interesting that the guy is selected to be the first Jew, and we don't understand anything. We don't have any background, as opposed to like Moses, where there's a lot of winds up to that story, right? Or Joseph, a lot of wind up to that story. Okay, I think we're going to pause here. It was an interesting, over one word, we had a very interesting conversation. So I hope that you have a good week in your generation. I don't know what the hell that means, but anyway, I was trying to. I hope everyone has a good week, and thanks for coming to study. So we have 2 more classes. Okay. So we'll learn 2 more stories together. But maybe I'll pick 2 different ones, and we'll kind of look at those. Okay. Very good. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice afternoon. Passive.
But buying a lot.
Good. I like it. That's true. Yeah. So maybe we're giving Noah too hard of a time. That you're giving, that maybe the rabbis then, according to your view, are giving Noah too hard of a time.